As I spoke with guests for this series, I heard a lot of fears, I heard a lot of uncertainty, I heard a lot of concerns. It's hard to be optimistic in the middle of a pandemic. But there was also something positive in their responses, which they attributed to the impact of COVID-19.
The other thing I would love to see maintained is just the increase in kindness and grace that a lot of companies are showing. So we ran a survey a few months ago in the midst of the pandemic in July. It was a global survey and of full-time working adults. And it was striking how many people reported that they actually thought their company culture had improved through the pandemic, despite these were all people who had formerly worked in offices and were now working remotely because of the pandemic. And a good number of them said they felt that their culture had improved, and they used words like generosity and kindness to describe how things had changed.
I'll be honest, if we try to do this probably before the pandemic, we would not have gotten the kind of sympathy and understanding, and also that the willingness to learn and the kind of consciousness raising that we did now. So the pandemic, in many ways, it woke us up in a deeper way, and that's why it happens, because everyone feels the pain.
We've had a lot of employers actually who opposed us in the past vehemently, even funded our opposition, coming to us saying, I didn't see it before, but now because my workers aren't able to get unemployment insurance due to the sub-minimum wage system and the very complicated system of calculating tips and how that reflects on your paycheck and how that translates to unemployment, people are having this kind of seeing the light moment as a result of the pandemic, because the pandemic lifted the veil on all of these shortcomings.
The health and economic crisis made people to see the other side, to open up their minds a little bit more to the experiences of others, and to listen. In the previous 2 episodes of this series, we have looked at the way things are right now for different people, from sub-minimum wage workers to gig workers, and how these current realities could affect work in the future. In this final episode, we will be looking forward at what could be, how society could better prepare its people for the coming changes. And we'll be doing it with the hope that people's minds are still a bit open to seeing the other side, listening to other ideas, taking a second look at things they may have previously dismissed outright, debating them, talking about them, and maybe finding common ground. My name is Stanley Azwakola. Welcome to the final episode of The Future of Work in a post-COVID-19 world.
The future of work is going to be flexible.
The future of work is likely to get better for the majority of people, assuming we have the right policies in place.
I think the future of work is going to be remote.
The future of work is going to be a revitalized and reimagined service sector that includes just and equitable opportunities for all.
The future of work is going to be just.
The future of work is going to be full of opportunities for some and full of risk for others.
The future of work is going to become increasingly polarized between people with good jobs and people with bad jobs, between the haves and the have-nots, unless we work very hard to make it otherwise.
The future of work is going to be about our humanity.
The future of work is going to be unpredictable.
Let's kick things off with an idea that is not too controversial. There seems to be a consensus among the corporate elite that the solution to inequality and the loss of middle-class jobs to automation and trade is simply upskilling and reskilling workers so that they can find better jobs. You read about it on the opinion pages of the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. You hear it on repeat when the global corporate elite gather in Davos for the World Economic Forum. In a report last year, the World Economic Forum estimated that it would cost the United States $34 billion to reskill the 1.4 million workers expected to lose their jobs to automation in the next decade. But to what extent is upskilling and reskilling workers the silver bullet that it is almost being framed to be?
I think it's important. I think it's great to enable workers to get more skills, and getting more skills does tend to enable getting better jobs. I think the idea that it's the only solution is not only blinkered, but also kind of profoundly immoral, because we have a world where many millions of people do not have more than a high school education and will not get more than a high school education. And so the idea that they should be left to struggle simply because they haven't upskilled themselves is, I think, deeply concerning.
For what it's worth, I'm also a believer in lifelong learning and workforce development. Governments and corporations must plan to consistently train, retrain, and ready the workforce for the work of the future. But there is a problem with its framing as a be-all and end-all for tackling workforce displacement. Simon Brandler of Sidewalk Labs argues that upskilling needs to be combined with other measures. He proposed a combo initiative similar to the Trade Adjustment Assistance Program of the US government, which supports the adjustment of workers displaced by trade and tariff policy. Here's how he explained it to me.
There is expanded benefits that are provided to individual workers who have lost their jobs because of trade issues. So you eliminate a tariff, and then suddenly you lose a textile plant. And so the idea was, well, those folks, they're entitled to extended unemployment insurance, they're entitled to worker retraining, and entitled to certain relocation benefits. So if they happen to be located in a particular town in West Virginia where there isn't work, then they can move to a town in Texas where there is work. So the idea of the trade adjustment assistance, as it's been implemented over time, is to deal with people who lost their livelihood because of broader economic goals for the country. So the country overall benefited from trade, but an individual community didn't benefit from trade, and therefore, the idea is to sort of rush benefits to those people and make it holistic, where it's not just unemployment insurance, it's not just relocation, it's not just job training, it's all of them. Where the idea is it's a multifaceted problem, and you need a multifaceted solution when folks, due to sort of broader dislocation for, as the economy transformed, where you need to figure out a mechanism to help those who might be left behind.
The idea of a multifaceted, holistic program like this does make a lot of sense, even though it's useful to point out here that evaluators of the Trade Adjustment Assistance Simon referenced say that the program has demonstrated low overall effectiveness over the years. Now to a more ambitious idea, guaranteed or universal basic income. An old idea which has gained prominence in recent years. Guaranteed income is paying regular cash to individuals without any conditions. Some advocates want a universal basic income, which means every citizen in the country receives a regular but equal amount of money, regardless of whether they're employed or not. Others advocate the targeting of disadvantaged or low-income groups. But the idea is the same. People get this money and nobody tells them what to do with it. In recent times, prominent business leaders like Tesla CEO Elon Musk, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg, and a former presidential candidate Andrew Yang have been strong advocates for guaranteed income. In December 2020, Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey donated $15 million to an organization called Mayors for a Guaranteed Income to test pilot programs in their cities. Here is Simon again, making a neutral case on why guaranteed income deserves a look, but why more testing is needed first.
I think it's intriguing. I think there are, good reasons why having something that's universal, is appealing. I know that, for example, historically, Social Security and Medicare, which is a universal entitlement, have been a lot more popular with the body politic than, programs that are means tested. But in order to make it valuable enough to an individual, it's quite expensive. So there's the cost reason to be concerned. And I think that there's sort of the economic research is not completed on what the broader effects of UBI are. So, there are, in Finland, in Stockton, California, there have been notable UBI initiatives. In Finland, there was early results that were somewhat negative, then longer results where there seemed to be actually some positive effect on employment. Those need to be scrutinized a little more closely before we do something that could be quite expensive. But the research is worthy. It's really just a question of whether it provides the greatest bang for your buck, as far as providing sort of a floor below which people won't fall.
So I decided to speak with people whose organizations have been involved in testing guaranteed income programs in different communities. First, I spoke with Taylor Isenberg, the Executive Director of the Economic Security Project, an organization which has channeled millions of dollars towards supporting guaranteed income projects and research in Stockton, California, where 125 people were given $500 a month for 24 months, and in Jackson, Mississippi, where 20 black mothers living in extreme poverty were given $1,000 a month for a year. I also spoke with Kyung-Ji, the co-executive director of the Center for NuLeadership on Human Justice and Healing. When COVID-19 struck, her organization, which is a policy think tank, first gave $150 per week to 20 families, and subsequently changed tactics, offering $600 a month to 8 families. I asked them to share some of their findings and takeaways so far from the test cases.
People decrease stress, improve health or self-reported health outcomes, pursue education opportunities, pay down debts, seek or get rid of second jobs, spend more time with their kids. It's very similar, both qualitative and quantitatively, similar results that we've seen with other cash-based studies across the world. The primary thing that shifts for people is how they spend their time. People, again, go from working a second or third job to, spending time helping their kids with their homework. They go from spending their time searching for a job to going to school. I think, that was a surprise to us, but ended up being a realization, and I think bears itself in other research from other academics, is that the poor just don't have time to, and they're shortchanged the opportunities a lot of the other rest who have economic stability have to think and orient themselves towards the future, both for themselves and their kids. And when they had that stability, that's like that time and that shift towards that orientation was one of the primary things that we saw.
One of the recurrent themes was this allowed me to pay my bills so I can think about the next line of stuff.
I also raised some of the fears and concerns that people generally share about guaranteed income programs. How do you respond to people who argue that providing free guaranteed cash without conditions to those in need could lead them to spend it wastefully? Basically, the argument of how do you trust people to make the right decisions and do the right thing?
The data doesn't bear it out, so they're going off of their own, very small, limited worldview. The data across thousands of experiments across the world show that people don't waste the money. They're smart about the use of resources. They know where it goes, and they take care of themselves.
The point here is not how well are you spending every dollar of the $600. We're not here to be okay, give us a spreadsheet of how you spend $600 and we'll be the judge of how, whatnot. Part of building agency and part of fashioning our own solution is also allowing us to make decisions, exercise agency, make mistakes.
When I spoke with Quartz editor Heather Landy, she mentioned another concern that people raise about the basic income idea.
The arguments against it is that, you have the freeloader problem and people who won't want to work because they're getting money anyway.
So I asked Taylor about it. Would this make people stop working? Would it lead to a decline in productivity?
Again, data doesn't show, that doesn't happen. None of the experiments been done for the past 3 to 4 decades have shown people stop working. From the Alaska permanent dividend to the Cherokee dividend, and to the negative income tax experiments in the 70s, to all of the cash experiments Give Directly is doing worldwide, to all the basic experiments happening. The only time you see changes in workforce participation, it's because teenagers don't drop out of high school to go work, which is something we shouldn't want as a society, and moms stay home longer to take care of kids, which is something also that, with people, that's the choice they want to make. They should be able to make that choice.
The biggest issue with guaranteed income is how expensive it's going to be. How do we raise the money for it? If it's done at a universal level, it would cost trillions of dollars annually. If it is targeted at certain disadvantaged people, it's still going to cost a lot. So some people have argued that in order to make it work, government should scrap all other benefit programs to free up cash and then provide a substantial basic income for citizens to use as they wish. Simon says that's too risky, and Taylor says guaranteed income should not be a replacement, but a supplement to other benefit programs.
I'm very wary of proposals that purport to sort of wipe the slate clean, because a lot of the programs and responses that have developed over time have been based on hard-learned lessons. And if you were to sort of, and I'm also wary of magic bullet solutions. I think, UBI has potential that's worth exploring, but I think the folks who believe it is a magic bullet that can solve all manner of problems need to bring more evidence to the table, because I haven't been convinced, but I'm persuadable. I just haven't been convinced that is the magic solution.
It might be a little bit better because they have to go to less appointments to get resources, but in our current system, the question is we have enough money, we have enough resources. We're the wealthiest country in the history of humankind. We can solve poverty. The question, and if we try to solve poverty by making the poor pay for it, then we're not actually fixing anything. So I think that's why for us, it's really important that we advocate that any sort of income floor has to be about also breaking up concentration of wealth and resources at the top. That's how we can and should pay for it, not tearing apart all the already kind of very weak systems that are in place.
Remember what I said at the beginning? This episode is about taking a second look at ideas rather than impulsively dismissing them. The ideas we've discussed so far are by no means the only ambitious ones being advocated for. For instance, some have called for modernizing the earned income tax credit scheme.
Our primary thought process is to take what has been a really effective program and make it better. And that, for us, involves more money to more people, so higher up the income scale. We're moving or making it available to people who don't currently qualify, which primarily are caregivers and students, but also are the populations that live with the highest rates of poverty. And do some modernizations in terms of how it's delivered, make it automatic. For example, include I-10 filers that both in itself would make sure the money is reaching more people.
There are others advocating for job guarantees for displaced workers.
A job guarantee from the federal government would essentially be guaranteed public employment at a non-poverty pay with good health benefits and other things that is doing work that is socially beneficial. And this is something that, among other economists, Sandy Darity has talked about, for example. And I think this is exciting because it would ensure that no one is in working poverty. It would provide a floor below which employers can't pay, a lower wage than that. But it would also mean that people are engaged in socially beneficial activities, doing the many things that could do with more people to help with, whether it's maintaining national parks or whether it's providing additional assistance or mentoring for primary school age children with their homework, or whether it's visiting elderly people in care homes to give them company. There are so many things that we lack people to do in our society that one could think of people doing through this scheme. And then it would, of course, have to be complemented, as I mentioned, by a program that would ensure that people who aren't able to work are still able to have a basic income.
We don't have to agree with all of these ideas, or any one of them for that matter. But we can agree that the big changes happening in work and the economy deserve a policy response. We can agree that as work continues to rapidly change, our social model needs to keep pace. We have to redefine and reimagine what work is. I belong to the school of thought that contends that the biggest challenge to making progress may be cultural in nature. America values individualism. It colors and shapes public policy. But as powerful as individualism may be, solidarity may serve the country better in preparing for the future. I have started every episode of this series by playing a montage of my guests' responses to the question of what the future of work is going to be. And now here is my own answer. The future of work is going to be decided not by technology, but by policy and the choices that we make as a society. And that's all on this final episode of the series. As always, I am grateful to the MPA Program at the Colin Powell School of Civic and Global Leadership at the City College of New York for the support, and also to my supervisor, Fatma Ashraf, for her guidance. Special thanks also to all the guests on this episode and throughout the series for their unique insights. My name is Stanley Azwakola. Goodbye.